told you I was going to ruin you," she said smoothly through the wood, her voice chillingly calm. "The photos got you fired. You lost everything you cared about. But this is for me." I heard the sound of liquid sloshing heavily against the hardwood floor upstairs. The distinct, overwhelming, nauseating smell of gasoline began seeping under the crack of the basement door, stinging my eyes. Story 1. The Deepfake Server, San Francisco, California. Call me Thorn. I'll be the first to admit that dating Vesper was a massive, blinding mistake. She was a senior UX designer at a rival tech firm across the bay, and she was brilliant. But her brilliance was completely overshadowed by her intense, suffocating, clinical paranoia. After 8 months of dating, she started demanding the master passwords to all my devices. She would stay up until 4 a.m., her face illuminated by the blue light of her monitor, reading through my company Slack channels to make sure I wasn't flirting with my female coworkers. The breaking point came when I found a small, magnetic GPS tracker tucked deep into the inner lining of my leather laptop bag. I didn't even argue. I packed my things, changed the smart locks on my apartment, completely blocked her number, and cut contact. For the first 3 months, the breakup seemed surprisingly clean. My career was skyrocketing. I was finalizing a massive Series B funding round for my company, and the board of directors had essentially guaranteed me the CTO position. I was working out, sleeping well, and finally feeling like I had my life back. I thought Vesper had just moved on to her next victim. But a narcissist never truly moves on. They just go into the quiet, invisible planning phase. The weirdness started on a Tuesday afternoon. I was sitting in my glass-walled corner office overlooking the bay when my CEO, Garrick, walked in. He looked incredibly pale and completely confused. He shut the heavy glass door, locked it, and pulled down the privacy blinds. "Thorn, what the hell was that voicemail you left me at 3 a.m.?" Garrick asked, his voice tight and shaking with anger. I stared at him, bewildered. "Garrick, I didn't call you last night. I was asleep by midnight. I was exhausted from the server migration." He didn't say a word. He pulled out his iPhone, hit play on his voicemail app, and set the phone down on my desk. The audio started playing. It was my voice. The cadence, the slight rasp, the specific way I clear my throat before speaking. It was flawlessly, undeniably me. But the words coming out of my mouth were absolutely unhinged. The voice on the recording was aggressively threatening Garrick, claiming I had built a malicious backdoor into the company's source code and was going to sell our proprietary user data to a Chinese competitor if I wasn't given the CTO title and $1 million bonus immediately. My stomach dropped into a bottomless, freezing abyss. The color drained from my face. "That isn't me," I stammered, the blood rushing out of my head. "I swear to God, Garrick, I never said that. Look at my phone logs." I frantically pulled up my call history. Nothing. But Garrick's caller ID clearly showed my personal cell phone number. "It's an AI voice clone," I said, my mind racing at 1,000,000 miles an hour. "Someone spoofed my number using an IP masker and used an audio generator. You know this tech exists, Garrick." Garrick looked at me like I was a massive liability. He didn't fire me on the spot, but the trust was instantly, permanently broken. The promotion was put on an indefinite hold pending a full internal security audit. I knew exactly who did it. I walked out to my car, pulled out my phone, and texted Vesper's old number. "Leave me alone, or I'm calling the FBI Cyber Division." She texted back 3 seconds later. "I don't know what you're talking about, Thorn, but you should really check your company-wide email. You look terrible on camera." I bolted back to my computer and opened my Outlook inbox. There was a mass email sent to the entire company. All 200 employees, the board of directors, and our major venture capital investors. It was sent from a dummy, untraceable, encrypted Proton mail address. The subject line was just my name. Attached was a massive video file. With violently shaking hands, I clicked play. It was a hyper-realistic 4K deepfake video. It looked exactly like me, sitting in what appeared to be my own apartment living room. The lighting, the shadows, the facial micro-expressions, the way my eyes blinked. It was a masterpiece of artificial generation. But the person with my face in the video was doing things that were so vile, so completely disturbing and career-destroying, that I physically vomited into my office trash can. It depicted me engaging in horrific, illegal acts while wearing my company-branded hoodie, staring dead into the camera. My office phone started ringing off the hook. My cell phone exploded with texts from horrified, disgusted coworkers. Within 10 minutes, building security was at my office door with a cardboard box. I was escorted out of the building in front of the entire engineering floor. People were staring at me like I was a monster. My career, my hard-earned reputation, my entire life was completely annihilated in less than 60 seconds. As I sat in my car in the parking garage, sobbing and hyperventilating, my phone buzzed. It was a text from a burner number. If you want the master source files and the cryptographic key to prove to the board it's a deep fake, meet me at the old decommissioned server farm in San Jose. Midnight. Come alone, or I send the video to your parents, your sister, and the local news stations. This is the monumentally stupid, absolutely idiotic decision that almost cost me my life. Any sane person would have driven straight to the police, handed them the phone, and let the authorities handle it. But I was in a state of absolute, blinding, panicked shock. The idea of my family seeing that video terrified me more than anything on this earth. I wanted to end it right then. I wanted to look Vesper in the eye, take the physical hard drive, and destroy it myself. I drove 45 minutes down to San Jose in the dead of night. The address was a massive, abandoned corporate warehouse that used to house legacy servers for a bankrupt tech firm. It was surrounded by a rusted chain-link fence, completely isolated in a dead, decaying industrial park. I parked my car a block away, my heart pounding so hard it physically bruised my ribs, and slipped through a gap in the fence. The heavy metal side door of the warehouse was propped open with a cinder block. I stepped into the pitch-black warehouse. The air was incredibly stale, smelling of ozone, dust, and rotting drywall. "Vesper!" I yelled, my voice echoing infinitely off the corrugated steel ceiling. A single harsh overhead fluorescent light flickered on at the far end of the warehouse, illuminating a small patch of concrete. Underneath the light was a cheap folding table. Sitting in the dead center of the table was a silver USB flash drive. I started walking toward it, my footsteps echoing loudly in the cavernous space. "You're so pathetically predictable, Thorn." Her voice suddenly crackled over the warehouse's dusty, vintage PA system. I spun around. I couldn't see her anywhere in the darkness. "You love your stupid career more than you ever loved me," she continued, her voice dripping with venom and a terrifying clinical calmness. "I spent 3 weeks training that neural network on every video, every voicemail, every photo you ever sent me. I own your face, Thorn. I own your voice. You belong to me now." I reached the table and grabbed the flash drive. As soon as my fingers touched the cold metal, the heavy steel door I had entered through slammed shut with a deafening boom. The sound of a heavy industrial padlock clicking into place echoed through the massive room. She had locked me inside. "I'm not going to let you leave," she whispered over the PA. From the shadows behind a row of empty, massive metal server racks, a figure stepped out. It was Vesper. But she wasn't just a bitter ex-girlfriend. She was completely, physically unhinged. In her hands, she was holding a heavy, yellow industrial steel crowbar. "Vesper, put it down. You've already ruined my life. What more do you possibly want?" I screamed, backing away from the table. "I want you to bleed the way I bled," she shrieked, her face twisting into a mask of pure rage, and she broke into a full sprint across the concrete floor. She swung the heavy iron crowbar directly at my head. I ducked just in time, the metal whistling inches past my ear, and it smashed violently into the side of the metal server rack, sending a shower of bright orange sparks into the air with a deafening crash. I didn't try to reason with her. Operating on pure, primal survival adrenaline, I grabbed the heavy metal folding table and shoved it violently into her legs. She tripped, crying out in pain, and crashed hard onto the concrete. I sprinted into the labyrinth of the massive, empty metal server racks, plunging myself into the total darkness of the warehouse. I could hear her screaming my name, her heavy boots stomping on the concrete, striking the metal racks with the crowbar as she hunted me. "You can't hide from me," she roared. I navigated the dark maze, my hands feeling along the cold steel, until I found a small, dirty window near the ceiling of the loading dock. I climbed a teetering stack of rotting wooden pallets, grabbed a discarded iron pipe, and smashed the frosted glass. I squeezed my body through the jagged frame, slicing my ribs open on the broken glass, and plummeted 10 feet into the overgrown, wet weeds outside. I ran to my car, bleeding, hyperventilating, and terrified, and drove straight to a police precinct. They arrested Vesper at her apartment the next morning. They found terabytes of data, voice clones, and the custom software she used to frame me. But the horror of AI is that the truth doesn't travel nearly as fast as a viral video. Even after she was convicted of extortion, cyberstalking, and attempted assault, the deepfake had already done its permanent damage. I was completely unhireable. The venture capitalists pulled their funding from my startup, blaming the scandal. I had to legally change my name and move to a different state just to get a mid-level IT job. Vesper went to prison, but in the digital world, she successfully assassinated me. Story 2. The Open House, Aspen, Colorado. I'm Tamsin. I was 28 and absolutely crushing it as an independent luxury real estate agent in Aspen. I sold massive, multi-million-dollar ski chalets to out-of-state billionaires, celebrities, and tech moguls. My life was glamorous, fast-paced, and heavily reliant on networking and constant phone calls. My biggest mistake was dating Cormac. Cormac was an audio engineer and indie music producer. He was incredibly charming at first, but underneath the surface, he was deeply insecure and terrifyingly controlling. He hated that I made significantly more money than him. He hated that I was always on my phone talking to wealthy male clients. When he threw a heavy glass bottle of vodka at my head during an argument about a client dinner, I packed my bags while he was at the studio, moved out, and filed a restraining order. 6 months passed. The restraining order seemed to work perfectly. I had moved into a high-security condo downtown and was completely focused on closing the biggest deal of my entire career. A $12 million off-grid mountain estate located about 45 minutes up a treacherous mountain pass. If I closed the deal, the commission would literally change my life and allow me to start my own brokerage. I had been communicating exclusively via phone and encrypted email with a reclusive billionaire buyer from London named Mr. Hawthorne. He was demanding, eccentric, and absolutely refused to do video calls, citing extreme privacy concerns. But his proof of funds letter from a major Swiss bank was completely legitimate, so I played the game and catered to his demands. 2 weeks before the closing date, my career started spontaneously, violently imploding. I woke up on a Wednesday morning to 12 missed calls from my managing broker. I called him back, and he was absolutely furious. "Tamsin, what the hell is wrong with you? he yelled through the phone. "Why are you leaving unhinged, screaming voicemails for our top-tier clients at 4 a.m.? I was completely stunned. "I didn't call anyone. I was asleep in my bed." He forwarded me the audio files. I sat at my kitchen island, my hands shaking uncontrollably as I listened to them. It was my voice, the exact pitch, the slight vocal fry, the cheerful, polished intonation I use specifically for clients, but the words were horrific. The voice was leaving voicemails on the personal cell phones of 3 different millionaire clients, cursing at them, insulting their families, and explicitly telling them I had been scamming them on property taxes and skimming off the top. It was utterly, terrifyingly flawless. Cormac was an audio engineer. He had hundreds of hours of my voice recorded from when we lived together. Voicemails, videos, arguments. He had used an advanced AI vocal cloner, spoofed my cell phone number, and systematically detonated my professional network. I lost 3 major listings by noon. The police told me that without physical proof or an IP trace showing he was doing it, cyber harassment cases involving spoofing could take months to investigate. I was completely, utterly helpless. The only thing keeping me afloat, the only thing stopping me from total financial ruin, was the $12 million deal with Mr. Hawthorne. That afternoon, my phone rang. The caller ID said Mr. Hawthorne. I answered, desperate to keep the deal alive. "Hello, Mr. Hawthorne?" The refined, deep British voice came through the speaker. "Tamsin, I am flying into Aspen tonight on my private jet. I want to do one final walkthrough of the mountain estate at 7 p.m. before I wire the funds tomorrow morning. Meet me there, alone. I value my absolute privacy, and I do not want any other agents present. This is the monumentally stupid decision that nearly cost me my life." It was the dead of winter in Colorado. The estate was miles up a secluded, unplowed mountain road with 0 cell service. A massive, severe snowstorm was rolling in. Any rational human being would have said, "No, it's unsafe. We can meet in the morning at my office." But I was desperate. Cormac had ruined my other deals. I needed this commission to survive. I convinced myself that billionaire clients are just eccentric and used to getting what they want. I threw on my heavy winter coat, grabbed the physical keys to the estate, and got into my Range Rover. I drove an hour up the winding, treacherous mountain pass. The snow was falling heavily, reducing visibility to almost 0. The estate was a massive, modern glass and timber mansion sitting alone on a snowy ridge, completely surrounded by dense, black pine forests. I pulled into the long driveway. There were no other cars. The house was completely dark, looming against the snowy sky. I unlocked the heavy front door and stepped inside. The air in the house was freezing. The heat hadn't been turned on. "Mr. Hawthorne?" I called out, my voice echoing in the cavernous, empty living room. Silence. I pulled out my phone. No service. Suddenly, from the total darkness of the second-floor balcony overlooking the living room, a voice spoke. "He's not coming, Tamsin." It wasn't the refined British accent of Mr. Hawthorne. It was my own voice. The AI cloned perfect replica of my voice, playing through a portable Bluetooth speaker. I froze, the blood turning to ice in my veins. The speaker clicked, and the voice changed. It was Cormac. "Mr. Hawthorne doesn't exist, babe." Cormac's real, sneering voice echoed from the shadows upstairs. I created the email address. I forged the proof of funds using a template. I used a voice modulator for the phone calls. You drove all the way up here for a ghost. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I had been lured into a trap. Cormac had orchestrated a fake, multi-million-dollar real estate deal over the course of 2 months, just to get me alone, off the grid, in the middle of a blizzard. "Cormac, you're violating the restraining order. "Let me leave," I said, my voice shaking as I slowly backed toward the heavy wooden front door. I grabbed the brass handle and pulled. It was locked from the outside. He had slipped out the back door and engaged the exterior deadbolt while I was walking in. "I took everything from you, Tamsin," Cormac said, stepping out from the shadows on the second floor, illuminated by the moonlight reflecting off the snow outside. He was wearing a heavy hunting parka. In his right hand, he was holding a long, wicked-looking hunting knife. "I ruined your precious career. Now, you have absolutely nothing left. Nothing but me." He started walking slowly, methodically down the massive, floating timber staircase. I didn't try to reason with him. I was trapped in a giant glass box in the middle of a blizzard with an armed psychopath. I looked around frantically. In the center of the living room was a massive stone fireplace with heavy iron fire-poking tools. I bolted across the room, grabbed the heavy solid iron fire poker, and turned to face him just as he reached the bottom of the stairs. "Put it down, Tamsin," he sneered, lunging forward with the knife. He slashed at my face. I brought the iron poker up, blocking the blade. The metal clanged loudly, operating on pure, terrified adrenaline. I swung the heavy iron rod like a baseball bat, catching him squarely in the ribs. Cormac roared in pain, dropping to one knee and clutching his side. I didn't hesitate. I turned and sprinted toward the massive floor-to-ceiling glass windows overlooking the snowy back deck. I gripped the iron poker with both hands and swung it with everything I had into the dead center of the tempered glass. The window shattered into a million cascading, glittering pieces. I dove through the opening, tumbling out into the freezing, deep snow of the back deck. I scrambled to my feet, the icy wind biting my face, and threw myself over the wooden railing, dropping into the waist-deep snow of the forest. "You're dead!" Cormac screamed from inside the house. I ran blindly through the dense, dark pine trees, sinking into the snow with every step, the cold burning my lungs. I didn't stop until I circled entirely around the massive property back to the driveway. By an absolute miracle, my Range Rover was still running, the exhaust billowing in the cold air. I threw myself into the driver's seat, locked the doors, slammed the car into reverse, and tore down the mountain pass at 60 miles an hour through the blizzard, praying I wouldn't slide off the cliff. I made it back to civilization and walked straight into the police station covered in snow, shivering violently and bleeding from glass cuts. They arrested Cormac the next morning at his recording studio. He went to prison for attempted murder and stalking. But the damage he did to my life was permanent. The AI voice notes he sent to my clients destroyed my reputation in Aspen. People don't care if the audio is fake. They only remember the drama and how it made them feel. I had to leave Colorado entirely. I live in Florida now. I sell commercial real estate, and I never, ever do business over the phone. Because I know that the person on the other end of the line might not be a client. It might just be the devil, wearing a flawless digital mask. Quick pause right here. Tamsin made a terrifying mistake. She let the desperation for a massive commission push her into driving up a secluded mountain in a blizzard to meet a client who refused to show his face on video. I have to ask you guys, if a billionaire client absolutely refused to video chat and demanded a meeting in the middle of nowhere, would you risk it for the money or walk away from the deal entirely? Drop a comment right now and tell me what you would do, because I read every single one. While you're down there, please take a second to hit that like button and subscribe to Creepy Digest. Now, let's get into our final story and find out why a call from 911 might actually be a death sentence. Story 3. The Dispatch Trap, Atlanta, Georgia. I'm Ronan. I was 34, living in a beautiful, historic home I had painstakingly restored myself in the quiet suburbs of Atlanta, Georgia. I was a senior partner at a prestigious commercial architecture firm. About to break ground on a massive, career-defining downtown high-rise project. My life derailed when I met Odessa. Odessa was a freelance graphic designer who dabbled heavily in AI image generation and digital art. We dated for a year. The relationship was passionate but incredibly, toxically volatile. She was deeply paranoid, constantly accusing me of cheating with my clients. The final straw was when I came home early from a business trip and found her in my home office. She had printed out hundreds of my emails, texts, and photos and pinned them to a massive corkboard connected with red string, like a serial killer's shrine. I broke up with her that night, packed her bags, and kicked her out. For 2 months, life returned to normal. I threw myself into the high-rise project. I upgraded my home security system just to be safe, installing high-end cameras, motion sensors, and smart locks. I felt secure in my fortress. But Odessa was a master of digital manipulation, and she had spent the last 2 months weaponizing her skills to destroy me. The nightmare began on a Monday morning. I was sitting in the glass boardroom of my firm, presenting the final blueprints to our biggest investors. My boss, Vahan, had his assistant walk into the room. She looked pale and completely terrified. She handed Vaughn a thick manila envelope. He opened it, pulled out a stack of 8 by 10 glossy photographs, and his face drained of all color. He immediately halted the meeting, dismissed the investors, and asked me to step into his private office. He threw the photos onto his mahogany desk. "Ronan, what the hell is this?" Vaughn asked, his voice shaking with disbelief. I looked at the photos. I felt like the floor had completely dropped out from beneath me. They were incredibly high-resolution, photorealistic images of me. But in the photos, I was in a grimy alleyway, handing what looked like thick bundles of cash to known, heavily tattooed violent gang members. Another photo showed me sitting at a table covered in illegal narcotics and blueprints, laughing. "Vaughn, this is fake," I gasped, feeling physically sick, my heart hammering. "This is absolutely 100% fake. It's AI generated. Look at the fingers on the guys in the background. They're distorted. The lighting on my face doesn't match the background. This is a deepfake." But to a 60-year-old traditional architecture firm partner, seeing is believing. The images were so flawless, so expertly crafted by Odessa's advanced AI software, that the minor glitches were invisible to the untrained eye. The photos had been mailed anonymously to every partner in the firm, along with a typed letter claiming I was laundering cartel money through the new high-rise project's construction budget. I was suspended without pay immediately, pending a full criminal investigation. The high-rise project was stripped from me and handed to a junior partner. In the span of 30 minutes, my entire life's work was decimated by a few lines of code and a vindictive ex. I drove home in a state of absolute shock. I knew Odessa did it. I called the police, but the detective told me that investigating anonymous, fake photos sent in the mail was incredibly difficult and would take weeks to get warrants for IP addresses. I was sitting in my living room at 11 p.m., drinking whiskey in the dark, staring blankly at the wall, completely defeated. Suddenly, my cell phone rang. The caller ID displayed Fulton County 911 Dispatch. I immediately answered. "Hello? Ronan? Last name?" A calm, authoritative, perfectly modulated female voice asked. "Yes, this is him," I said, my heart starting to race again. "This is Fulton County 911 Dispatch. We have received a credible, anonymous tip from a neighbor that 2 armed individuals have breached the rear perimeter of your property. Our officers are en route with their sirens off. ETA is 3 minutes. Do you have a secure location in the house?" Panic seized my chest. I looked toward my backyard glass doors. It was pitch black outside. "Yes," I stammered, standing up. "I have a finished basement. The door has a heavy deadbolt." "Go there immediately, sir," the dispatcher ordered calmly. "Do not turn on any lights. Lock the door and do not come out until officers physically breach the house and announce themselves. This is the monumentally stupid, fatal mistake I made. I didn't question the call. I was already in a state of extremely high anxiety. I didn't realize that 911 dispatchers don't typically call you first during an active home invasion. I dropped my phone on the couch, sprinted down the hallway in the dark, opened the heavy wooden door to the basement, and scrambled down the wooden stairs. I slammed the door shut behind me and threw the heavy deadbolt, locking myself in the dark. I stood in the pitch-black basement, my heart hammering against my ribs, straining to hear the sound of police sirens or breaking glass upstairs. But the sirens never came. Instead, 5 minutes later, I heard the heavy, unmistakable sound of the basement door deadbolt slowly, methodically sliding open from the outside. "Hello, Ronan," a voice echoed down the stairs. It wasn't a police officer. It was Odessa. My blood turned to ice. She had spoofed the caller ID. She had used an AI voice generator to sound exactly like a calm, professional 911 dispatcher. She had orchestrated the entire call just to trick me into locking myself in a windowless, soundproofed box. "Odessa, what the f*** are you doing?" I screamed, running up the wooden stairs and slamming my shoulder against the door. But she had jammed a heavy wooden chair under the doorknob on the outside hallway. It wouldn't budge. "I told you I was going to ruin you," she said smoothly through the wood, her voice chillingly calm. "The photos got you fired. You lost everything you cared about. But this is for me." I heard the sound of liquid sloshing heavily against the hardwood floor upstairs. The distinct, overwhelming, nauseating smell of gasoline began seeping under the crack of the basement door, stinging my eyes. She wasn't just crazy. She was going to burn me alive inside my own home. "Odessa, stop! Please!" I yelled, coughing as the heavy toxic fumes filled the enclosed stairwell. "The AI is amazing, isn't it?" she laughed, completely detached from reality. "I even generated a fake suicide note in your handwriting using a font generator. I'm uploading it to your social media right now. Goodbye, Ronan." I heard the sharp, terrifying flick of a lighter. Pure survival instinct overrode my panic. I didn't try to bash the door again. I knew it was useless. I ran back down the stairs into the basement. I knew there was a small ground-level ventilation window near the ceiling in the back corner of the room, hidden behind a massive drywall partition I had built. I grabbed a heavy iron sledgehammer I kept by my tool bench. I sprinted to the drywall and started swinging with everything I had. Upstairs, I heard the sudden, violent whoosh of ignition. The ceiling above me instantly grew hot. The smoke alarms began blaring, a deafening, piercing sound that filled the house. I shattered the drywall, exposing the small glass ventilation window. I swung the sledgehammer, shattering the thick, reinforced glass. The window was impossibly small, maybe 18 inches wide. I could see the flames licking the top of the basement stairs, turning the wood to charcoal. The smoke was thick, black, and suffocating, filling my lungs. I squeezed my head and shoulders through the jagged glass frame. The broken glass sliced deep into my chest and arms. But I didn't care. I kicked violently against the basement wall, pushing my body through the tight space like a rat until I tumbled out into the wet, cold grass of my backyard. I lay there, bleeding profusely, gasping for fresh air, watching as the entire first floor of my historic home was completely engulfed in a raging, unstoppable inferno. Odessa had fled the scene. Neighbors called the real 911. The fire department arrived 10 minutes later, but the house was a total loss. Everything I owned, all my memories, was reduced to ash. The police tracked Odessa down a week later, hiding in a cheap motel in South Carolina. They found her laptop, completely loaded with the AI voice cloning software, the spoofing programs, and the deepfake generators. She is serving 30 years for arson and attempted murder. But the psychological damage is permanent. I lost my career, my home, and my ability to trust reality. Even after the police finally cleared my name regarding the fake cartel photos, the architecture firm refused to rehire me. The stigma of a scandal, even a fabricated one, is too much of a liability for corporate investors. I live in a small, rented apartment now. I don't use a smartphone. I don't use social media. I don't even have a LinkedIn. Because I know that we live in a world where a few lines of code can create a perfect, undetectable lie. And when that lie is in the hands of a monster, they don't even need to be in the same room to burn your entire life to the ground. We love the convenience of the modern world. We love algorithms that predict what we want and software that makes our lives easier. But we are blindly handing over the blueprints of our identities to machines that do not have a conscience. When you mix the limitless potential of artificial intelligence with the darkest, most obsessive corners of human nature, you create a weapon that cannot be unfired. A deepfake doesn't just ruin a career, it rewrites your history. A cloned voice doesn't just play a prank, it builds a deadly trap. The next time your phone rings and you see a trusted name on the caller ID, take a second to really listen to the voice on the other end. Because the person speaking to you might not be human at all. It might just be the ghost of a past mistake, using a digital mask to lure you into the dark. Thank you for tuning in to Creepy Digest. If these true human-centric horror stories sent a chill down your spine, hit that like button, subscribe, and leave a comment below. Have you ever experienced something creepy with AI or a crazy ex? Let me know in the comments. Stay safe, trust your gut, and whatever you do, never ignore the red flags. Good night.